A wedding is supposed to be a promise of forever, a celebration of love sealed before family and friends. For Celeste, 7 months pregnant and radiant in white, it was the beginning of her perfect life with the man of her dreams. But what happens when the dream becomes a nightmare just hours before you say, "I do"? What happens when the man at the altar is hiding a secret so vile it could shatter not just one heart, but 2 families? This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's the story of a woman who turned her deepest pain into a devastating reckoning, proving that hell hath no fury like a bride betrayed. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Thorne family estate, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny celebratory diamonds. Celeste smoothed a hand over the gentle swell of her stomach, a serene smile gracing her lips. At 28, she was living a life that felt like a beautifully written script. 7 months pregnant with a child she already adored, and just 48 hours away from marrying Jack Thorne, the man who had not just captured her heart, but had seemingly built a fortress around it. Jack was everything a woman was taught to dream of. The heir to the Thorne fortune, a sprawling empire of boutique hotels and luxury real estate, he possessed a charisma that could disarm world leaders and a smile that had made Celeste feel like the only person in the world from their very first meeting. He was handsome in that classic old money way, sharp jaw, intelligent blue eyes, and hair the color of dark honey that he perpetually brushed back with an elegant hand. He'd pursued her with a gentle, unwavering determination that had felt like destiny. He didn't just love her, he celebrated her, encouraging her career as an art curator and listening with rapt attention as she spoke about Renaissance painters and Impressionist brushstrokes. Their love story was the stuff of modern fairy tales. A chance meeting at a gallery, opening a whirlwind romance that felt both thrillingly fast and profoundly right, and a proposal under the stars on the Amalfi Coast. When she'd found out she was pregnant, a few months later, Jack had wept with joy holding her, as if she were the most precious treasure he could ever possess. "A family," he had whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "You're giving me a family, Celeste. You're giving me everything." Now standing in the grand library of his family's ancestral home, she felt the truth of those words. The wedding was set to be the event of the year. Planners, florists, and caterers buzzed around the estate like diligent bees, all orchestrated by Jack's formidable mother, Genevieve Thorne. Genevieve was a woman carved from ice and ambition, her approval a rare commodity that Celeste had miraculously seemed to win. "You have a calming effect on him," Genevieve had told her once, her sharp eyes scanning Celeste's simple but elegant dress. It wasn't a compliment delivered with warmth, but rather a statement of fact, an acknowledgement of Celeste's utility. "Jack is passionate. He needs a steady anchor. You will be a good wife for him." Celeste chose to interpret it as a blessing. She knew she was marrying into a different world, a world of legacy and expectation, but she believed her love with Jack was strong enough to bridge any gap. Her cousin Serena certainly thought so. Serena, her maid of honor, had been her confidant since childhood. They were more like sisters, their bond forged through shared secrets and scraped knees. Serena had been her biggest cheerleader from the moment she met Jack. "He's perfect, Celeste. Absolutely perfect." Serena had gushed, her own bright eyes sparkling with excitement. "You two are like something out of a movie." Serena was staying at the estate with her, a comforting presence in the whirlwind of final preparations. She was helping Celeste address the last of the place cards, her laughter echoing off the leather-bound books that lined the library walls. "Can you believe it? In 2 days, you'll be Mrs. Thorne," Serena said, nudging her playfully. "Ready to be lady of the manor?" Celeste laughed, a genuine bubbling sound of pure happiness. "I'm just ready to be his wife. And a mum." She looked down at her belly again, feeling a soft flutter from within. "It's all happening so fast, but it feels so right." Yet even in this cocoon of perfection, a tiny dissonant note had sounded so faint she had barely registered it. The night before, during a small family dinner, Jack had been on his phone more than usual. When she'd leaned over to whisper something to him, he'd angled the screen away with a reflexive quickness that felt odd. "Just a last-minute fire at the new hotel site in Dubai," he'd explained, flashing her that reassuring smile. "Don't you worry your beautiful head about it. I'm handling it." And she hadn't. Why would she? He was Jack. He handled everything. He was her rock, her future, the father of her child. The thought of doubting him felt like a betrayal in itself. She dismissed the flicker of unease as pre-wedding jitters a common affliction of brides-to-be. Later that evening, as she was heading to her room, she overheard a snippet of conversation between Jack and his mother in the hallway. Genevieve's voice was a low, insistent murmur. "You must be more careful, Jack, with so much at stake." "Mother, it's under control," Jack had replied, his tone clipped and impatient. "Everything is perfectly under control. Don't worry about it." They had stopped talking the moment they saw her. Genevieve had given her a thin, polite smile, while Jack had immediately wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close and kissing her forehead. "Just discussing the seating chart for the 10th time," he'd said smoothly. "My mother is convinced your liberal artist friends will start a political debate with my conservative uncle." It was a plausible explanation, and he'd been so warm, so attentive, that she'd forgotten the strangeness of his mother's words. She had leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of his cologne, and letting the last of her unease dissolve. Standing now in the sun-drenched library, with Serena happily sorting ribbons beside her, the memory felt distant and insignificant. It was a tiny crack in a flawless diamond invisible to the naked eye. Her life was perfect. Her love was real. In 48 hours, her forever would begin. She had no reason to believe otherwise. The day before the wedding dawned bright and clear, the sky a perfect cloudless blue. A good omen, everyone kept saying. The estate was a hive of activity, the air thick with the scent of lilies and roses. Celeste spent the morning with the wedding planner, finalizing details, and the afternoon at a blissfully relaxing spa session with Serena and the other bridesmaids. Everything was proceeding with flawless precision, just as Genevieve Thorne demanded. Jack was supposed to be at the golf club with his father and groomsmen, a final day of bachelorhood, before committing to his new life. He was due back in the early evening for the rehearsal dinner. Celeste, feeling a wave of fatigue from the day's excitement, decided to retreat to the suite she was staying in for a quiet hour before she needed to get ready. The suite was breathtaking, a sprawling space with silk wallpaper and antique furniture that overlooked the manicured gardens. Jack's things were mingled with hers. A stray tie draped over a chair, his leather briefcase on the desk. A sense of domesticity was already settling in, and it filled her with a warm, contented glow. She slipped off her shoes and was about to lie down when she noticed his work laptop sitting open on the desk. He was usually so meticulous about closing it. Beside it lay his personal phone face up. As she walked past the screen, lit up with a notification. It was a simple message preview from a name she didn't recognize, Chloe. Chloe. Can't wait for the real honeymoon. This weekend is just for show, right? Celeste stopped dead, her heart giving a painful lurch. She stared at the screen, the words swimming before her eyes. The real honeymoon. The winking emoji seemed to mock her from the screen. It had to be a mistake, a joke. Maybe Chloe was a friend of his, someone with a twisted sense of humor. Jack had plenty of those. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. It was locked, of course. She tried his birthday. Nothing. Their anniversary. Nothing. A knot of pure, cold dread began to form in the pit of her stomach, so intense it was hard to breathe. This was insane. She was being paranoid. It was just pre-wedding jitters magnified 1,000 times. She walked away from the desk, pacing the length of the opulent room. She tried to rationalize it. Jack was a handsome, wealthy man. Of course, women threw themselves at him. This Chloe was probably some desperate ex who couldn't let go. Jack loved her. He was marrying her. He was having a baby with her. But the casual, confident tone of the message clawed at her. This weekend is just for show, right? It implied a shared secret, a deep-seated conspiracy she was not a part of. The fortress around her heart began to crumble, brick by painful brick. She found herself back at the desk, her eyes drawn to his laptop. He'd left his email open. Her conscience screamed at her not to look, that this was a violation of trust, a point of no return. But the sickening fear churning inside her was stronger. With a shaking finger, she clicked on his inbox. There was nothing incriminating on the first page. Work emails, messages from his groomsmen, a confirmation for their honeymoon flight to the Maldives. She was about to close it, flooded with a mix of relief and shame, when she saw a folder on the sidebar labeled Projects. It was a generic name, but something compelled her to click it. Inside there was another folder, Santorini Villa. Her brow furrowed. They hadn't discussed a villa in Santorini. She clicked again. The folder contained a reservation confirmation and a string of emails. Not with a realtor, but with a woman named Chloe Sterling. The reservation was for a private, secluded villa for 2 weeks, starting the Monday after their wedding. Celeste's blood ran cold as she read the email chain. The messages were flirtatious, intimate. Jack's words were laced with a passion and an impatience that made her stomach heave. He spoke of escaping, of being free, of celebrating their real beginning. Chloe, are you sure you can get away so soon after the event, Jack? Don't worry about that. It's all part of the plan. I'll be there. We'll finally have the time we deserve. Mykonos was just the appetizer. Mykonos, a business trip he'd taken 2 months ago. He'd brought her back a beautiful silk scarf, telling her how much he'd missed her the entire time. The room started to spin. Celeste gripped the back of the chair, her knuckles white. This was not a flirtation. This was a plan. A full-blown affair, with its own timeline, its own destinations, its own future. This weekend is just for show. The message on his phone now made perfect, horrifying sense. Just then she heard the suite door open. Jack walked in looking relaxed and happy, his cheeks flushed from the sun. He was unbuttoning his polo shirt when he saw her standing at the desk, her face as pale as a ghost. His smile faltered. "Celeste, darling, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." He moved towards her, his expression shifting to one of concern. She couldn't speak. She could only point a trembling finger at the laptop screen. His eyes followed her finger, and for a fraction of a second, she saw it, a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. It was there and gone in an instant, replaced by a look of confusion. He walked over and peered at the screen. "The Santorini villa." "Oh, that," he said, letting out a short, dismissive laugh. "Darling, you scared me. That's a surprise for you." Celeste stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. "A surprise?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Of course," he said, his voice a smooth, reassuring balm. He shut the laptop firmly. "It was going to be my wedding gift. A second honeymoon, just for us after the baby is born, and we are settled. I wanted it to be a complete secret." He stepped closer and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Chloe is just the concierge arranging it. You know how these high-end services are. They get a little overly familiar in their emails." He was so convincing. His touch was so gentle, his eyes so sincere. For a moment, she desperately wanted to believe him. The sheer relief of it would be overwhelming. She wanted to fall into his arms and let him tell her it was all a misunderstanding. "But the messages," she stammered. "The way you two were talking, and the text on your phone." His expression hardened slightly. "Celeste, are you saying you went through my private phone and my laptop?" The question was soft, but the undertone of disappointment was sharp. "Darling, I know you're stressed with the wedding and the pregnancy, but this is not like you. To doubt me like this the day before we commit our lives to each other." He was turning it around. He was making her the one at fault. Gaslighting. The clinical term popped into her head, and the clarity of it was like a slap in the face. "I trusted you, Jack," he continued, his voice laced with hurt. "I thought we trusted each other. For you to invent this sordid fantasy about me and a concierge because of a few poorly worded emails. It's insulting, Celeste. It truly is." He looked so genuinely wounded that a sliver of doubt crept back in. Was she overreacting? Was the stress and hormonal flux of pregnancy making her paranoid? He saw her hesitation and pressed his advantage, pulling her into an embrace. "Let's forget this ever happened," he murmured into her hair. "It's our wedding tomorrow. Let's focus on that, on us, on our baby." He held her tight, but for the first time his arms didn't feel like a fortress. They felt like a cage. She allowed him to hold her body rigid, with a tension that wouldn't dissipate. She let him soothe her with empty words and practiced lies. But as she stood there, wrapped in the arms of the man she was supposed to marry, she knew with a bone-deep certainty that nothing he had said was true. The crack was no longer invisible. It had splintered, running deep and threatening to shatter everything she had believed in, and she knew she couldn't ignore it. The rehearsal dinner was an exercise in surreal torture. Celeste sat beside Jack, a fixed, brittle smile on her face, feeling as though she were watching a play of her own life from a great distance. She listened to the toasts, the laughter, the excited chatter about the next day's festivities, and every joyful sound was a grating insult to the screaming chaos in her mind. Jack was the perfect fiancé, a role he played with masterful ease. He kept his arm draped around the back of her chair, squeezed her hand under the table, and leaned in to whisper loving words that now sounded like venom. He was performing for his family, for their friends, and most of all, for her. He thought he had successfully quelled her suspicions that his web of lies had held firm. He believed she was back in her box, the docile, trusting bride. He was wrong. Every loving look he gave her now felt like a taunt. Every time he mentioned our future, she had to fight the urge to scream. She watched him interact with his family and friends, this charming, beloved man, and saw only a stranger, a skilled actor who had fooled everyone, including her. Her gaze kept drifting across the table to Serena. Her cousin was laughing at something one of the groomsmen said, her face alight with a carefree joy that made Celeste's stomach clench. How could she sit there so happy and relaxed, knowing what she knew? Or was it possible Serena was innocent? The thought was a desperate lifeline. Maybe Chloe was the only other woman. It was a horrifying thought, but it was containable. The betrayal of her fiancé was one thing. The betrayal of her sister in spirit was another. After the dinner concluded, as guests began to mingle, Celeste excused herself, claiming a headache. She needed to be alone. She needed to know the whole truth, no matter how ugly. Jack's explanation about the concierge was laughably thin, and the name Chloe Sterling was now seared into her brain. Back in the suite, she grabbed her own laptop. The lie he'd told her had one fatal flaw. It was too specific. A high-end concierge service, a villa in Santorini, Mykonos. These were details she could use. Her hands shook as she typed Chloe Sterling Luxury Concierge into the search bar. The results were immediate. Chloe Sterling wasn't a concierge. She was a well-known social media influencer, a model whose feed was a curated gallery of exotic locations, designer clothes and five-star hotels. Her profile was public. Celeste's heart pounded against her ribs as she clicked on the page. The pictures were a testament to a life of sponsored luxury. Chloe in Paris, Chloe in Bali, Chloe in Dubai. And then 2 months ago, a series of posts from Mykonos. Celeste's breath hitched. She scrolled frantically through the photos. Chloe posing on a yacht, Chloe at a beach club, Chloe raising a champagne glass against a sunset. In the reflection of her oversized sunglasses in one of the photos, Celeste could just make out the distorted figure of the man taking the picture. He was wearing the same linen shirt Jack had worn in the photos he'd sent her from his business trip. It was damning, but it wasn't definitive proof. She kept scrolling, her blood turning to ice. A few weeks back, a picture of Chloe holding a large bouquet of peonies, Celeste's favorite flower. The caption read, "He just gets me. Even when he's away, he knows how to make me smile." At luckiest girl. Celeste felt a wave of nausea so intense she had to grip the edge of the desk. Jack had sent her the exact same bouquet for her birthday last month. Still, she needed more. She needed something that connected this woman directly to the charade of her own life. She scrolled further, going back months, looking for a crack, a slip-up. And then she found it. It was a group photo posted about 6 months ago. A birthday party at a trendy New York club. Chloe was in the center, beaming, surrounded by friends. And standing right behind her, with one arm casually draped over the back of Chloe's chair and the other holding a drink, was Jack. He was smiling, looking completely at ease. But it wasn't Jack's presence that made Celeste's world collapse. It was the other person in the photo, standing on Chloe's other side, laughing as if she didn't have a care in the world. It was Serena. The air left Celeste's lungs in a painful rush. She stared at the screen, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. Serena. Her Serena. Her maid of honor, her confidant, her cousin, who had held her hand through every high and low of her life. She was friends with Jack's mistress. No, it was worse than that. The way Serena was looking at Chloe, the easy camaraderie in their posture. This wasn't a casual acquaintance. They were close. Suddenly, 100 little moments snapped into sharp, horrifying focus. Serena always defending Jack if Celeste expressed the slightest doubt. Serena encouraging Celeste to give him his space when he went on his frequent business trips. Serena just last week borrowing Celeste's laptop for an hour, claiming hers had crashed. Had she been deleting things, covering tracks, Celeste felt a cold fury begin to burn through the shock. They hadn't just betrayed her. They had been laughing at her. The two people she trusted most in the world had been partners in a grand, cruel deception. She needed the final irrefutable piece of the puzzle. An idea cold and clinical formed in her mind. Serena's password for her social media was the name of her childhood dog, a name Celeste knew as well as her own. With trembling fingers, she logged out of her account and typed in Serena's details. She hesitated for a moment, then clicked Login. She was in. She went straight to the private messages. There it was, a message thread with Chloe S. Her heart hammered as she opened it, and the world fell away. It was all there. Months and months of conversations. They talked about Jack referring to him as Jay. They talked about Celeste, but they didn't use her name. They called her the Project, or the Anchor. Serena, you have to see the ring he got the Project. It's disgustingly huge. She actually cried. Chloe, sooner this is over, the better. Is he still on track with the plan? Serena, of course. He's got her completely fooled. And the baby thing just makes it easier. Locks in the family's support. Genevieve would never let him back out now. He says after the wedding, he'll start the process. A quick marriage, an amicable split after a year, and he gets control of his trust fund without any strings attached. And you get him, Chloe, and she gets a nice little settlement and a baby. Everyone wins. Well, almost everyone. Celeste stopped reading, a strangled sob escaping her lips. It wasn't just an affair. Her entire relationship, her marriage, her child. It was all a sham, a business transaction. Jack needed to be married to unlock the full inheritance his grandfather had left him, an ironclad clause to ensure the Thorne heir was a stable family man. She wasn't his anchor of love. She was his anchor for a trust fund. The pregnancy hadn't been a joyous surprise. It had been a strategic move to solidify his position. She scrolled down and saw the final soul-crushing message sent just that afternoon while they were at the spa. A photo. It was a selfie of Serena and Chloe taken years ago laughing together on a beach. Underneath, Serena had written, "Serena soon, my friend." The performance is almost over. Tomorrow, she plays the bride. Then the real show begins. The betrayal was so complete, so monstrous, that it transcended pain and settled into something else entirely. Something cold, hard, and terrifyingly calm. The tears stopped. The shaking ceased. The woman who had been weeping over a broken heart was gone. In her place was someone else, forged in the fires of an unimaginable deception. They thought she was a pawn in their game. They were about to find out she was the one who was going to burn the whole board down. The grief that should have shattered her did not come. There was no a collapse into a weeping heap on the floor. No frantic call to her parents to cancel everything. The pain was there, a vast black ocean inside her. But it was eerily still. Over the surface of that ocean, a storm was gathering, a silent, calculated fury that was colder and more dangerous than any screaming match could ever be. Celeste closed the laptop, the click of the lid echoing in the silent room like a gavel falling. The performance was almost over. Serena was right about that. But it wouldn't be Celeste playing the part of the fool. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her face was pale, her eyes dark with a chilling resolve. The soft, romantic bride-to-be had been hollowed out, and in her place stood a queen, planning a war. They had conspired to humiliate her in secret, to use her and her unborn child as props in their sordid play. A quiet annulment or a cancelled wedding wouldn't suffice. That would allow them to control the narrative to paint her as unstable, hysterical, a jilted lover who couldn't handle the truth. No, the truth deserved an audience. Their humiliation needed to be as public and spectacular as the wedding they had so meticulously planned. She sat down at the ornate desk, took a deep breath and began to plan. Her mind, once filled with thoughts of floral arrangements and honeymoon destinations, was now a razor-sharp instrument of vengeance. Her first call was not to her family, but to an old friend from college, a man named Ben Carter. Ben was a tech genius, a cybersecurity expert who had once jokingly told her he could hack into the Pentagon if he was bored enough. He owed her a favor after she'd helped his sister land a coveted internship at her gallery. "Ben," she said, her voice steady and devoid of emotion, "I need your help. It's an emergency and it's time-sensitive, and it requires absolute discretion." She explained the situation in clipped, precise sentences, laying out the deception without a single tear. She could hear Ben's stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Celeste, my God," he finally breathed. "What do you need? I have screenshots of everything," she said, her voice like ice. "Text messages, social media conversations, photos. I need them compiled into a presentation, a slideshow, and I need it to play on a loop on a big screen. Can you do that? A big screen. At your wedding?" Ben asked, the shock in his voice turning to dawning comprehension. "Oh, you are not messing around. The wedding venue has 3 large projection screens they use for slideshows of the happy couple. They're connected to a central AV system. I need you to get remote access, and I need you to be on standby tomorrow at precisely 12:30 p.m. When I give the signal, you press play. Consider it done." Ben said, a note of grim admiration in his voice. "I'll need you to send me the files securely. I'll handle the rest. They won't know what hit them." Her next step was to ensure her own escape. She couldn't stay and face the fallout, the questions, the pitying looks. She needed a clean break. She booked a one-way ticket to Florence, Italy, under her maiden name for a flight leaving at 4 p.m. the next day. Florence was where her grandmother had been born, a place she had always dreamed of visiting. It would be the birthplace of her new life. She packed a small bag with essentials, her passport, and a folder containing printouts of all her evidence, just in case. She hid the bag in the back of the large closet. Finally, she had to prepare herself for the performance of a lifetime. She had to get through the next 18 hours without betraying a hint of the inferno raging within her. She splashed her face with cold water, practiced her smile in the mirror until it looked less like a grimace, and went to find Serena. She found her in her room, scrolling through her phone, a picture of innocence. "There you are," Serena said, looking up with a bright smile. "Feeling better? I was getting worried." "Much better," Celeste replied, her voice smooth as silk. "I think I was just overwhelmed. All this excitement. It's a lot." She sat on the edge of Serena's bed, forcing herself to play the part. She asked about the bachelorette party gossip, about what shoes Serena was planning to wear. Every word was a lie, every smile a carefully crafted mask. It was sickeningly easy. Serena, so confident in her deception, saw nothing but the naive, lovesick cousin she thought she knew so well. Later, Jack came to her room, bearing a cup of chamomile tea. He was in his finest form, the caring, attentive fiancé. "Feeling settled, my love?" he asked, stroking her hair as she sat on the bed. "I am so sorry if I was harsh earlier. I was just so shocked that you could even think those things. I love you, Celeste. Only you." He leaned in to kiss her, and it took every ounce of her self-control not to recoil. She forced herself to kiss him back, to put a hand on his cheek and murmur, "I know. I love you too. I was being silly." He smiled, satisfied. The puppet was back on her strings. He had no idea the strings had been cut, and the puppet was now holding a pair of shears. As she lay in bed that night, feigning sleep, she felt a profound sense of calm. The betrayal had carved a hole in her, but it had also filled her with an unshakable purpose. They thought they were in control. They thought they were the directors of this show. But she was the one who would be bringing down the final curtain. Tomorrow was her wedding day, and it would be a day that none of them would ever forget. The morning of the wedding was a masterpiece of organized chaos. Hairstylists, makeup artists, and photographers swirled around Celeste's suite, transforming her into the picture-perfect bride. Genevieve Thorne swept in and out, issuing crisp commands and inspecting every detail with an eagle eye. Through it all, Celeste remained a tranquil island in the center of the storm. Her calm was so profound that people commented on it. "You're the most serene bride I've ever seen," the makeup artist remarked, dusting a soft shimmer onto her eyelids. "She's just so ready," Serena added, fluffing the train of Celeste's couture gown. "Aren't you, cousin, not a nerve in sight?" Celeste met Serena's gaze in the mirror, offering a small, enigmatic smile. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." She allowed them to dress her, to place the delicate veil in her hair, to hand her the bouquet of white peonies, the same flowers from Chloe's Instagram post. Holding them didn't trigger pain. It fueled her resolve. Each petal was a reminder of the lies, a justification for the beautiful, terrible thing she was about to do. Her father arrived to walk her down the aisle, his eyes misting over with pride. "You look like an angel, sweetheart," he whispered, tucking her arm into his. As they stood at the back of the magnificent old church, waiting for the music to begin, her father squeezed her hand. "Are you happy, Celeste?" She looked at him, her kind, honest father who deserved so much better than the deceit he was about to witness. "I'm about to be dad," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm about to be." Then the familiar strains of the wedding march began. The heavy oak doors swung open, revealing the scene she had both dreamed of and now dreaded. The church was filled to capacity, a sea of expectant faces turned towards her. The aisle, lined with hundreds of candles and cascading white orchids, seemed to stretch for miles, and at the end of it, waiting at the altar, stood Jack. He looked impossibly handsome in his custom-tailored tuxedo. When his eyes met hers, he broke into a radiant smile, a look of pure adoration that was so flawlessly executed it could have won an award. Beside him stood his groomsmen, and on the other side her bridesmaids, with Serena at the front, looking angelic in her pale blush gown. Every step she took down that aisle was a deliberate act of war. The gentle rustle of her dress was a battle cry. The serene expression on her face was her armor. She walked past rows of Jack's powerful business associates, his blue-blooded relatives, and her own beloved family and friends. They were all here to witness a union, and a union they would get not of two lovers, but of truth and consequence. She focused on Jack's face. She saw the smug confidence in his eyes, the proprietary pride of a man who believed he had won at everything. He was looking at his beautiful pregnant bride, the final piece in his meticulously constructed puzzle. He saw his trust fund, his freedom, his future with another woman, all walking towards him in a halo of white silk and lace. He had no idea he was looking at his own destruction. When she reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Jack's. Jack's grip was warm and firm. He leaned in his breath, ghosting her ear. "You've never looked more beautiful," he whispered, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "I am the luckiest man in the world." "You have no idea," she whispered back, her voice so low only he could hear it. He gave a slight frown, a flicker of confusion, but there was no time to question it. The officiant, a kind-faced man, with a gentle voice, began the ceremony. The words washed over Celeste in a meaningless drone. She tuned out the readings, the homilies about love, trust, and fidelity. Her heart was beating a steady, rhythmic drum, a countdown to the moment of detonation. She felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, felt the warmth of the candlelight on her skin. The air was thick with anticipation, but only she knew what they were truly waiting for. Finally, the officiant reached the pivotal moment. "And now we come to the vows," he said, smiling benevolently at them both. "The sacred promises that will bind you together." He turned to Jack. Jack cleared his throat. His eyes locked on Celeste, and began to recite the vows he had written, filled with eloquent promises of eternal love and unwavering support. Then it was her turn. The officiant smiled at her. "Celeste, would you like to share your vows?" A hush fell over the church. This was it. She took a half step forward. She felt a small vibration in the discreet clutch bag. She held a text from Ben. "System ready. Say the word." She looked directly into Jack's eyes, the eyes of the man who had shattered her world. She took a deep, steadying breath and began to speak. "Jack!" Celeste began, her voice ringing out with perfect clarity in the cavernous, silent church. It was a voice filled not with the tremor of bridal nerves, but with the cold, hard weight of authority. "I remember the first time you told me you loved me. We were in that little Italian restaurant downtown, and you said you knew from the moment you saw me that I was the one you wanted to build a life with. You promised me honesty, you promised me loyalty, and you promised me a future." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Jack's smile was unwavering, his eyes glistening with what appeared to be genuine emotion. He thought this was her heartfelt preamble, the romantic opening to her declaration of eternal love. The guests leaned forward, captivated. Serena dabbed at her eye with a tissue, a perfect portrait of a moved maid of honor. "I believed in those promises." Celeste continued, her tone beginning to shift, a subtle edge of steel creeping into her voice. "I believed in the life we were building, the family we were starting." She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture that drew a collective soft sigh from the pews. "But I've learned recently that promises can be meticulously crafted lies, and our future can have a very different meaning depending on who you're talking to." A murmur of confusion rippled through the guests. Jack's smile tightened at the edges. His eyes darted from Celeste to his mother Genevieve, who was now sitting ramrod straight, her face a mask of sudden tension. So today, standing here in front of everyone you care about, I want to make some new vows," Celeste declared, her voice rising in power. "My first vow is to honesty. The kind of honesty you so beautifully pretended to value." She turned her head slightly, her gaze sweeping over the audience before landing with surgical precision on Serena. "For example, I believe a maid of honor, a cousin, a sister, should be honest. She shouldn't, for instance, be best friends with her cousin's fiancé's mistress." A collective gasp swept through the church. Serena's face went white, her jaw dropping in horrified disbelief. Jack took a half step toward Celeste, his hand reaching for her arm. "Celeste, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a furious whisper. Celeste pulled her arm away, her eyes flashing with fire. "I'm not finished," she snapped before turning her attention back to the stunned crowd. "But why stop there? My second vow is to loyalty. A husband should be loyal. He shouldn't be planning a real honeymoon in Santorini with a model named Chloe Sterling while his pregnant fiancée plans their wedding." She took out her phone. A single word sent to Ben. "Now." In that instant, the 3 large screens placed strategically around the church, which had been displaying a tasteful monogram of their initials flickered to life. The first image to appear was the screenshot of the text message from Chloe. "Can't wait for the real honeymoon. This weekend is just for show." Right. Chaos erupted. People were standing up, craning their necks, pulling out their phones. Jack stared at the screens, his face a contorted mask of rage and panic. "Turn that off! Somebody turn that off!" he roared, but no one knew how. The slideshow continued a brutal, undeniable narrative of his deceit. The next image was the group photo from the New York club, Jack, Chloe, and Serena all smiling together. Then came the damning social media messages between the 2 women. The screen filled with their cruel words magnified for all to see. "Serena, you have to see the ring he got the project. It's disgustingly huge." Chloe, "Is he still on track with the plan?" Serena, "He's got her completely fooled, and the baby thing just makes it easier, locks in the family's support." Celeste's voice cut through the pandemonium like a shard of glass. "It seems I wasn't a fiancé," she announced, her voice trembling with rage, but never breaking. "I was the project. My baby, our child, wasn't a blessing. It was a strategic move to unlock a trust fund." All eyes were now on Jack and his parents. Arthur Thorne, his father, looked apoplectic, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Genevieve looked as though she had been turned to stone, her icy composure finally shattering into a million pieces of public shame. Serena had crumpled, sobbing hysterically, while her own parents stared at her with expressions of pure horror. But Celeste wasn't finished. The final image appeared on the screen, the selfie Serena had sent to Chloe just yesterday. The 2 of them on a beach with the caption, "Soon, my friend." The performance is almost over. Tomorrow, she plays the bride. Then the real show begins. Celeste looked directly at Jack, whose face was now ashen. "So my final vow is this, Jack," she said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper that still carried to every corner of the church. "I vow to never see you again. I vow to raise this child, my child, far away from the poison of your family's greed and deceit. I vow to be the strong, honest, and loyal mother that this baby deserves, everything you are not and never will be." She took the magnificent, disgustingly huge engagement ring from her finger. She didn't throw it. She walked the final few steps to the altar and placed it gently on the velvet cushion where their wedding bands were supposed to go. "The performance," she said, her voice clear and final, "is over." Without another glance at the man she had almost married or the cousin who had betrayed her, she turned her back on the altar. She lifted her head high, and with the whole world watching, she began her walk back down the aisle. This time she wasn't walking towards a lie. She was walking towards her life. The walk back down the aisle was the longest and most liberating journey of Celeste's life. The cacophony of the ruined ceremony, the shouts, the sobbing, the furious whispers was the soundtrack to her emancipation. She didn't look at a single face. Her gaze was fixed on the great oak doors at the end of the aisle, the portal to her new world. The guests parted for her like a river, cleaving around a stone, their faces a mixture of shock pity and stunned admiration. She was a vision in white, not a bride, but a warrior, leaving a battlefield of her own, making the train of her dress, sweeping away the ashes of her old life. As she reached the doors, she heard Jack's voice roar with fury, bellowing her name. "Celeste! You will not do this! You will not humiliate me!" She didn't turn. She didn't slow down. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the brilliant sunshine, taking her first breath as a free woman. The air had never tasted so sweet. A car she had prearranged, a discreet black sedan, was waiting at the curb precisely as planned. The driver, a professional she had hired for his discretion, opened the door for her without a word. As she slid into the cool leather interior, she could hear the commotion spilling out from the church behind her. The last thing she saw before the car pulled away was her father emerging from the church, his face a storm of confusion and anger looking for her. She sent him a quick text. "Dad, I am safe. I am okay. I will explain everything. Please just trust me." Inside the church, the scene had devolved into utter chaos. The Thorne and Miller families were on the verge of open warfare. Arthur Thorne was roaring at a shell-shocked Serena, whose parents were trying to shield her, while simultaneously demanding an explanation. Genevieve Thorne, her carefully constructed world in ruins, had her sights set on her son. Her voice, usually so controlled, was sharp with fury. "How could you have been so stupid, Jack?" She seethed, her voice low and venomous, so only he could hear. "I warned you to be careful. I told you to end it." Jack, cornered and publicly castrated, turned his rage on the only person left he could blame. "You knew about this," he snarled at his mother. "You knew and you let this happen." The accusation hung in the air, another layer of deceit exposed for the guests still lingering to hear. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. News of the dramatic wedding that wasn't spread through their elite social circle like wildfire, fueled by 100 smartphone videos. The carefully guarded reputation of the Thorne family was in tatters. Several of Arthur Thorne's key business partners, men who valued integrity and stability above all else, were in the pews and witnessed the entire spectacle. The instability that Jack's grandfather had feared had just played out on the grandest stage possible. The trust fund, the very prize for which he had orchestrated this entire sham, was now in jeopardy, its clauses likely to be contested by fuming board members. By the time Celeste's plane was taking off bound for Florence, her old life was already being dismantled. Her phone buzzed with an avalanche of messages from her shocked and worried parents, from friends offering support, and a string of increasingly desperate, then furious, then pleading texts from Jack. She read none of them. She simply turned the device off and dropped it into her purse. She landed in Florence as the sun was setting, painting the sky over the Arno River in hues of pink and orange. She checked into a small, charming hotel she had booked in the Oltrarno district, a place known for its artisans and quiet streets. Her room had a small balcony overlooking a hidden courtyard. That night, she didn't cry. She sat on the balcony, breathing in the foreign air, a hand resting protectively on her belly. She felt a profound sense of peace. She had lost a fiancé, a cousin, and the life she thought she wanted, but she had found something far more valuable herself. She had discovered a core of strength she never knew she possessed. She was not a victim. She was a survivor. In the weeks that followed, Celeste built a new quiet life. She called her parents and through tears and patient explanations told them the whole story. Their anger at Jack was eclipsed only by their fierce pride in her. They became her staunchest allies, handling the legal mess back home and creating a buffer so she wouldn't have to engage with the Thorns. She explored Florence on foot, visiting the Uffizi Gallery and the Pitti Palace not as a curator, but as a woman rediscovering her own passion. She found a small apartment, started taking Italian lessons, and made friends with the local shopkeepers. She was no longer Jack Thorne's fiancée, or the project. She was just Celeste, a woman preparing to be a mother. Months later, her son Leo was born in a peaceful hospital in Florence, with her own mother by her side. Holding him for the first time, Celeste felt a love so pure and powerful it eclipsed any lingering shadows of betrayal. He was her future. He was her victory. One day, while Leo slept in his stroller in a sun-dappled piazza, she received an email from an old friend back home. It was a link to a Society News article. The headline read, "Thorne Empire in Turmoil. Jack Thorne disinherited engagement to influencer. Chloe Sterling implodes amidst scandal." The article detailed how, in the wake of the wedding disaster, the Thorne Family Trust Board had indeed invoked the morality clause, stripping Jack of his primary inheritance. His relationship with Chloe had disintegrated under the pressure and public scrutiny. He had lost everything he had schemed to gain. Serena, shunned by family and friends, had reportedly moved away to start over her reputation in tatters. Celeste read the words without triumph, but with a quiet sense of justice. She closed the browser. Their fate was no longer her concern. She looked at her beautiful son, sleeping soundly under the Tuscan sun, and smiled. Her revenge wasn't the explosion she had set off in the church. Her true revenge was this: her peace, her freedom, and the beautiful new life she was building, promise by promise for herself and her child. Celeste's story is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can often forge the strongest souls. She walked into that church a bride, but walked out a hero of her own story. Her revenge wasn't just about exposing a lie. It was about reclaiming her truth and building a new future on her own terms for herself and for her child. She proved that you can't build a life on a foundation of deceit, because eventually the walls will come crashing down in the most spectacular way. What did you think of Celeste's incredible act of courage? Let us know in the comments below. If you were moved by her story of strength and justice, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own power. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life stories. Thank you for listening.